Hey folks, welcome back. This is our third video in the A through 20 series, normal procedures. So the pilot monitor is outside doing his walk around. We're going to review what the pilot flying has done so far. So cockpit lights have been adjusted. We're going to remember ignore these because FS Labs can't really simulate it. So we're not going to be doing any of these steps. Next page over. The pilot... The captain here, CM1, crew member number 1, which is the captain, we're going to push that recall button again. We talked about why it has to be 3 seconds in length. Logbook, we're going to assume it's good. MEL, CDL, the plane is clean. The captain is going to accept the aircraft. The ATIS has been obtained, so, pilot flying monitoring, listen to the weather together. The load sheet here, this is not going to be done. And we're going to start from here, OEB. Check. So basically, OEBs are these things right here. So here's an example of an OEB, Operations Engineering Bulletins. This OEB here specifically, abnormal V alpha prot, that came out, I think in 2014. There was a Lufthansa 321 climbing out, and the plane started to go nosedive on them. They luckily had altitude to deal with it, but basically, I think there was ice that froze the angle of attack probes, and the angle of attack probe was sending wrong information, but they were all sending the wrong information at the same time. Plane starts to nosedive. The pilot tried to pull back and regain control, couldn't. A little bit of a similarity there with 737 MAX. But basically, the automation is trying to shove the nose down and push the nose towards the ground. To try to save you from an impending stall that wasn't happening. So if this ever happens, it says right here, and any time with speed above VLS, and we're going to talk about what VLS is, if the aircraft goes into a nose down that cannot be stopped, pretty scary stuff, by pulling back on the stick, immediately apply this. So 1 ADR, you're going to keep on, and 2 ADRs you're going to turn off. And we're going to see in the overhead where these push buttons are. So the more OEB an aircraft has, you got to remember a lot of things that might change a normal procedure. A common one in the past was hydraulic. The PTU would overheat, and you had to remember to do certain items. What Airbus has done, because OEBs can they can disrupt the normal flow or the way you deal with an abnormal procedure, is it will actually show in the ECAM when you have a failure of some component that's affected by OEB. It will say, hey, it's an OEB reminder feature. You say, hey, if you have this, remember to go to the QRH. So not all aircraft has OEB reminders installed. So this is why it's important, every leg to review your OEBs with the other pilot. So what we're going to do now will be the pilot flying tasks. Remember, the FO is outside doing his walk around, and the pilot flying will be doing this. And we're going to talk about in detail all of them, and it's going to lead here to the FMS preparation, which will probably be another video. And once the FO comes back, he's going to start here on nav charts, and he's going to check my FMS. And we're going to keep moving forward. When both pilots are seated, this is meant to be done together. It even says here that it has to be done together, but in real life, every pilot does it whenever they want to. And we're going to be talking about this. Remember, the FCU, whoever's flying is responsible for the FCU, unless you're hand flying it. We're going to check the oxygen mask, loudspeakers, and then it's going to lead to the takeoff briefing. So that's it. This is probably going to be, 2 videos up to the FMS, and then the FMS up to takeoff briefing will be video number 2. All right, guys, so we're back here in the cockpit. Pilot flying flows. Cockpit lights have been adjusted. Recall push button, that's a captain task, so I'll assume here I'm the captain, so I'll just push and hold the recall button. Oh, there it is. There was something hidden under canceled caution, so nav TCAS fault. The other pilot is not in here. If he was, I would, just let him know I'm canceling this. So I'm just going to push clear. clear, so we're back to normal. The logbook is good, no MELs, no CDLs, so it's a clean plane. So the captain will formally accept the aircraft, so he'll say, okay, this aircraft is safe to fly. Airfield data has been obtained, so when the pilot monitoring was listened to the ADAs, the pilot flying wrote it down with him together. OEBs have been reviewed. Let's say this aircraft only has the abnormal alpha protection. So all I have to do is do a mental note that if the airplane starts pushing the nose down on its own, I'm going to come here and turn, let's say, ADR 2 and 3 off, and I'll, revert to alternate law and be able to regain control of the aircraft. So we're going to start the flow. The very first thing, it says all white lights off. That does not mean you do a flow just to turn the white lights off. Airbus on the FCOM is very specific that you turn the white lights off as you go through your flow. So let me put the overhead view to make it a little bit easier to see. So here's the overhead view. The very first item is to turn the white lights off on the cruise supply. So as you go up, there's a white light. So you're going to go ahead and push it. You zoom in to make a better view. So cruise supply is, it was off, now it's back to on. An important thing to see, remember, if you recall, that this little indication here, cockpit oxygen, was amber. So cockpit oxygen was amber. Now that I pushed that button, it went to white. So look what happens when I do cruise supply off. This changes to amber, cruise supply on, it goes back to white. Alright, so recorder. There's a test you have to do, and there's a lot of steps to it. This test is done wrong a lot because it involves going to both ACPs, putting on intercom, so just pay attention on how it's actually done. So we're going to push this button, ground control recorder. We're going to go back to this view at a virtual cockpit. The speaker, the loudspeaker has to be clicked off, not turned down, but actually clicked off on this side. And the right side, the FO side, also has to be clicked all the way to off. So you're going to have to ask, hey, can you turn your speaker off? So both of them are off. Parking brake has to be on, and this step here is missed to put the ACP into intercom on both sides. Also, INT button has to be out, the intercom button has to be out and turn all the way to minimum. So both sides out and scroll all the way to minimum. Only then you can go and push this button. So we're going to push, and hopefully we're going to try to hear a tone. There it is. So that's test passed. Now, what you have to remember though is if someone tries to call you or you're trying to monitor ATC here on the ground, the FCOM doesn't say you have to turn that back on, but it's kind of common sense. If you shut the speakers off, go ahead and open them back up. You don't want to leave this on intercom hot because you're saying some things about the mechanics that you don't want them to hear it. So, alright, you want to do it. And the parking brake stays on because the pilot monitoring has to look at the indicators of brake wear. Alright, back to the overhead. So these two fault lights on the GPWiz are normal because the IRSs are not aligned. Evacuation, the evac, it can be either captain or captain plus purser. Flight controls are all on, so there's nothing white there to extinguish. Aligning the ADIRS. Some people say it has to be 1. If you look here at the labeling, Airbus did it this way. If you look here, it says IR1, IR3, and then IR2. So it's not 1, 2, 3. So they inverted the order on that. So some instructors will tell you it has to be 1, 2, and then 3, but it doesn't say that on the manual. But just for good practice, let's do it that way. Also, some people say you have to wait for the on-bat. That's not part of the test anymore. It hasn't been for years. But some people still wait for the on battery to show. So we did 1, 2, and then we're going to go to nav 3. So it's going to take a while to align. If the aircraft has GPS or if it doesn't, it affects where you have to initialize it at. We're going to go over detail. So we're done with this first column. Now we're going to go down here towards exterior lights. So exterior lights, you want to put the strobe in auto. So meaning once you get off the ground, it's going to come on, but you're going to turn it on before you take off. Beacon, leave it off. We're only going to turn the beacon on for prior to pushback. Nav logo, that's company policy. You know, some airlines say leave it on 1 for odd days or 2 for even days. Or if it's the FO's leg, you leave it on 2. Captain's leg, you leave it on 1. Just obey your company policy. Turn off stays off. Landing gear or a landing light, there's off, retract, and on. Make sure you leave it on retract, nose off. And then from there, we're going to go to signs. Seat belts, we're going to leave it off because we haven't gotten our fuel load yet. No smoking, leave in auto. And emergency exit lights, put it into arm. So when it's off, you see a off light here. And when you go to arm, it extinguishes. The lighting has been done already by the pilot monitoring. Probe heat, we leave it on auto. Cabin pressurization, we're going to leave it on auto. So there's a little detent here. So right now it's not on auto. Scroll it back, and there's a little tiny detent you're going to feel on the actual aircraft. Leave it on auto. Going up to the air conditioning panel, that was already done by the pilot monitoring, but the pack flow switch is a pilot flying switch, so it depends on the load. And just as a reminder, if the APU bleed is on, it doesn't matter what you do with this switch on the ground. The default is always going to be high, regardless of the switch. So let's say today we have a really light load, 90 passengers. So we're going to put it in low, and here you can adjust the temperature however you want. And up to the electric panel, these fault lights are normal. That's just because the engines are not spinning, so the generators are not working. Now there's a battery test we have to do. So right now the batteries are, they're on. Doesn't mean they're providing power to the aircraft. They're probably isolated now because they're fully charged. So this test is done this way. So I'm going to bring up the page. So we have to bring up the electrical page. And I'm going to pop this out. Go back to the overhead view. And turn them off. You can see that they're off. And then we're going to turn them back on. And you see the amperage? Okay, the amperage is already back to 0. Very quickly. So it didn't hang there at, above 60 amps. So these are charged up pretty good. So that's it. That test is passed. So let's say, for example, you turn them off and you turn them back on, and they stay, let's say, at 80 amps for more than 10 seconds. Well, this battery is not charged. So you'd have to leave them charging for about 20 minutes or so and then retry the test. So for right now, it passed the test. Fuel pumps. In the past, there was an OEB that the fuel pumps had to be off for fueling. That's not the case anymore. So we're going to turn the fuel pumps on even though we're not fueled up yet. If your company policy says different, just do what your company says, but no, as per Airbus, that has not been the case for a long time. Unless your airplane is affected by the OEB still that requires them to be off during fueling. Hydraulic pump or hydraulic panel, they're all off. And we're going to do an engine fire test. So, the guard is there, the fire push button is in. We're going to, no agent are discharged. We're going to push the button. You see the squib. And I'm going to have to hold this while changing the view. So master warnings on both sides, and you can shut this off and still hold it so you don't have to hear this noise the whole time. So if you look up there, you know, I'm still holding it, okay? And we're going to come down here to the ECAM, and it says there, right there, engine fire. Obviously don't comply with this ECAM. And we're going to go down here, and this is extremely important indicator is the fire. It's overlooked a lot, but on an evacuation, this is another indication that you have by just looking down here. Your eyes are down here if the fire has been, you know, extinguished or not. So we have all the indications we need. We got the oral warning as well, so we can go up there and release it. We're going to release it. That passed the test. And remember also what we talked about. There's 4 rows of lighting, or 4 columns of lighting. If you notice, there's 1, 2, 3, 4 rows, and they all lit up. And same thing. We're gonna shut that warning. Okay, we have engine fire indicated here on the screen as well, on the ECAM. And notice this little green arrow. That green arrow is called an overflow arrow. So this ECAM has 1 line, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and there's more. So if you want to see what else is on that ECAM, you have to come here and push the clear button. And see, there was 2 more lines in there. And the fire is eliminated here. So that test passed as well. So we're going to go back to the overhead and, you know, get our finger out of there. So we released it and it's extinguished. Audio switching, we leave it in norm. There's captain on 3, FO on 3, and normal, so leave it at 12 o'clock. And we go back down. No white lights to extinguish. And up here, there's one step that needs to be done. We're going to turn this off, and we're going to turn the PA, public address, and we're going to turn this to 12 o'clock. So on the ACP of the 3rd occupant, we're going to put the PA out and 12 o'clock, basically so the CVR can record what the flight attendants have been saying in the back. Depending on your airline, you might or might not have this RMP up here. And that's it. So now we continue to look up. And there is the maintenance panel. So on the maintenance panel, we just make sure there's no white lights illuminated. What sometimes happens on aircraft that you have to turn the FADAC on to check the oil level. It's not hard to forget to turn them back off. So someone forget it back off, back on, raise the guard, and turn them back off. And remember, any guarded switch requires cross confirmation with both pilots. Alright, so we're done with the overhead. We're going to come back down to the center instrument panel. Alright, so now we'll be talking about the center panel. I'll just highlight what the area is. So this is the area of the center panel. A few things you need to check here is the pilot flying. It's starting on the ISIS. Let me just change the view so I can zoom in. So on the ISIS, things you have to check, it's already aligned up. It has nothing to do with the aiders up in the overhead. So got here, you know, blue over brown. You can also adjust the brightness as you need. So adjust the brightness up or down. The bugs feature, that's not used. I think Airbus even says not to use these bugs. If you push the LS and you're doing an ILS approach, you get the localizer and the glide slope. Out here with the outer knob, you can adjust the altimeter setting. So let's say today is 3005, and if you push it, it goes back to standard. Alright, so we're done with the ICEs. Now it says to check the clock. I'm going to switch the view, first officer view. Okay, so here on the clock, so this area right here is called permanent data. So this never changes regardless what system page is displaying. So we got the clock up here. See there's 3 positions for the clock. There's GPS, INT, and set. We usually leave it on internal clock. If you ever have to adjust the internal clock, there's a procedure on the FCOM for you to follow. Okay, so we got the clock here matching those two with GPS. I've never ever seen them wrong at all. You can also push here to get the date. This feature doesn't work on FS Labs. There's a chronometer up here. You can stop, pause, continue, or stop and reset. And there's a elapsed time here at the bottom, so you can go run, stop, and then reset. A lot of pilots use this on just before takeoff. They put it to run. Easy to keep track of the flight time. Up here you have the anti-skid nose rear steering control, off or back to on. So you keep that on. Simulator would let me. Alright, so it's on, and we're done with the center panel. So we're gonna move down to the pedestal. So down here in the pedestal, you just bypass the FMS. It's not time to do that yet. So RMP, you can put your frequencies in there on the VHF1, VHF2, and just notice this SEL light. So I'll zoom in so you can see a little bit better on this SEL light. If you're not on the default radio for your side, so the default for the left side is VHF1, so if I go to VHF2 or even 3 or HF2, that light will pop on. So VHF1, put the frequencies that you need. Company policy will say, ATC on 1, company on 2. Let's say our company frequency is 30.8. And now we go down to the ACP. So my microphone is for VHF1. Microphone now is VHF2. Or if I want to talk to the cabin crew, that will be there. And if I want to make a PA announcement, this is push and hold. So if I release, it goes back to the microphone. So I'll leave the microphone announcement on. This is push and hold. Oh, see, that was my PA. FS Labs even simulates that. So here I can monitor. So right now, I monitor VHF1. If I push this out, I monitor VHF2, and you can turn the volume up or down. Let's say I don't want to monitor the cabin. I don't want to monitor the PA anymore. If you want to hear Morse code for the VOR, you can turn that up here, turn it down. So the ACP is done. And we'll go back up. There's a cockpit door check to be done. This is extensive. You actually have to get up to work in the door. This is the only time I've ever seen Airbus ask you to touch this switch here, the annunciator test. So we're going to put it in test. We're going to come down here. There's the fault light, open light, and also you have to look up over on the overhead. See if I can all the way up there. Okay, so if you guys see this panel up here, there's 3 lights for the strikers: top, mid striker, bottom striker. You want to make sure they're all illuminated. You're going to come here, turn it back to bright. Alright, back to bright. All the lights extinguished up here, so there's nothing on. And we're going to look back down. And the cockpit door is there, so I'm going to unlock it. Up, So open came on, you pull the door, make sure it opens, release, and then you can lock it, and then manually you have to open the door with the knob and then pull it out to make sure it works both electrically and manually. So we're done with that test. Come here to the switching panel. Make sure all of the switching panels are on the 12 o'clock norm position. Keep moving down. Truss levers are at idle. So I'm going to move them so you can see. So this is Toga. This is Flex MCT. This is Climb. Idle. And then there's reverse idle. I can pull it back here. This is full reverse, idle reverse, and back to idle. So make sure they're touching idle. Engine mode selector, it was already checked, but you have to do it again. Make sure they're in the off position. And ignition is in normal. Parking brake still on. You're going to check to make sure the gravity extension handle is stowed. And it is. When it's not stowed, it looks something like this. So make sure it's down. From there, you move up to ATC. Let me change the view to the FO. Oh, we're going to look down here so you can see all the knobs we have. So altitude reporting, you leave that on. If it's the FO or right seat FO, you put it on 2. Left seat, you put it on 1. We leave this on standby. Right before pushback, we go to auto. Once you go to auto, mode Sierra turns on. And back to standby. And if you leave it on auto, you take off, it goes automatically to mode Charlie. But anytime it's in auto, mode Sierra is on. Let's say you got your clearance. We'll put your code here, 3500. We put it on above for takeoff. Starting descent, you go below, and then in cruise, most people leave it in all. In cruise, I like to leave it below in case of an emergency descent. This is the TCAS, so just a little note. This is actually 2 panels, even though there's no lines. TCAS is this panel, so just make a mental line in there. And the transponder is this panel over here. So just think as it's 2 different panels there. And then there's the FO, ACP, and RMP. You know, they're going to come here, they're going to set it however they want it. So let's say they want to listen to VHF2, turn it up, and they're going to leave it on VHF1 or 2 for their frequency. So if you see the SCL light, someone is probably on the wrong radio, and the captain was. So VHF2 is the standard for the SCL light does not come on if I go anything else. VHF1 is not the standard on this side and not the standard on that. So kind of as a reminder, because it can be confusing. Let's say you're talking to VHF2 and then you put a frequency here and swap. Well, you just swapped VHF1 and you're talking on 2, so you can talk to the wrong person. So make sure you understand, you know, microphone, monitoring, and that's it. From here, we get our charts out or our EFB, and we start the FMS.